This guide covers all the actions the Red Mage learns from level 51 to 90 in order. We go over how each action is meant to be used and recommend ways to use it when relevant. We also summarize the changes in the combat rotation at level 60, 70 and 80. In the final summary, we outline an optimized opener and explain how it leads into the general rotation, and also touch on the stat priorities of the Red Mage. I will assume you already know the basics of Red Mage from level 50, and if not, you can view my Red Mage starter guide to get caught up. I will also assume you are acquainted with common abbreviations like GCD, oGCD and weaving, and if these abbreviations are unfamiliar to you, I have a short describing GCDs and oGCDs. Note that weaving is the concept of using oGCDs between GCDs. Now then, at level 52, you learn the weapon skill Moulinet, which works as an AoE alternative to the 1-2-3 melee combo. It costs 20 of each mana per use and is better than the melee combo on 3 or more targets. Take note that using Moulinet 3 times in a row costs 10 more of each mana type than the melee combo. And Moulinet can be used any number of times to spend as much mana as you wish at this level. At level 54, you learn the spell Vercure, which heals for a very respectable amount for spammable DPS heal, and so can be used in a tough spot to save yourself or someone else. It also activates dual cast, so you can use this to prepare dual cast without an attack target when you need to. At level 56, you learn the ability Contrasixt, which is an AoE attack that is very similar to Flesh. At any point you would use Flesh, you should also use Contrasixt, even on single target, since they do not share cooldown. At level 58, you learn the ability Embolden, which is a raid-wide damage buff that boosts everyone in your raid's damage, but specifically only boosts magic damage for yourself. This is important because all of your ability-based attacks just so happen to all do physical damage, betrayed by them explicitly, not denoting them doing either an element or unaspected damage. You should use Embolden as close to on cooldown as possible, although in a coordinated group you may want to line up the cast with other raid buffs. This does indeed mean that it is your responsibility to line up your melee combo bursts with Embolden and not the other way around. At level 60, you learn the ability Manification, which immediately grants you 50 of each mana, letting you instantly jump into a melee combo. This should be used either on cooldown or delayed only a few seconds to line up with raid buffs in a coordinated group. Try to plan it so that you intend to use a melee combo immediately after using Manification, as some trait you learn later will make this important. Make sure you have at most 50 of both mana types when you use Manification, so none of its value goes to waste. The main differences to your rotation since level 50 now is that Moulinet is introduced as an AoE mana spender, Contrasixt is introduced as an extra oGCD attack to use on cooldown, and Embolden as well as Manification are introduced as cooldowns to boost your burst damage. If you save 50 of each mana type leading up to Embolden, you can with the help of Manification fit 2 full melee combos in the damage buff from Embolden. At level 62, Jolt is upgraded to Jolt 2, and all of your other single target spells get a big boost to their potencies. Your AoE options are still better on 3 or more targets, but on 2 targets you should now use Jolt instead of the Thunder 2 and the Arrow 2. Remember that, should you have the Fire or the Stone procs, they should take priority over Jolt on 2 targets too. Another major change this causes is in the way you should use Swiftcast and Acceleration. The massive boost to Jolt's potency means that skipping it is a significantly smaller damage gain. On the other hand, as you may have already noticed, using Acceleration or Swiftcast displaces the cooldown of Flesh and Contrasixt compared to your 5-second dual cast sets, which means using either Acceleration or Swiftcast to skip one Jolt at the same time also guarantees you will delay your next Flesh and Contrasixt by 2.5 seconds. For this reason, you should still continue to use Acceleration and Swiftcast for movement reasons. But aside from that, you should only use Acceleration and Swiftcast together to displace by 5 seconds instead of just 2.5. Or use them individually to displace Flesh and Contrasixt 2.5 seconds if they're already off by 2.5 seconds for some reason. This does indeed mean that it is okay to sit on the cooldowns to have them for these purposes. At level 64, you learn the spell Reprise, which is the Red Mage version of a resurrection spell. While it has the similar 10-second cast time that all of these types of spells have, dual cast works on it, enabling you to raise a player by casting Jolt or the Cure and then Reprise. Don't forget to use Lucid Dreaming and watch your mana, but remember that bringing another player back to life is always more valuable than your next 2 spell casts, so don't be stingy. At level 66, Scatter is upgraded to Impact, which boosts its potency so immensely that it is now superior to use Impact on 2 targets over using the Thunder and the Arrow. This means that on 2 targets specifically, your rotation is to cast Jolt, Impact repeatedly. At level 68, you unlock the mana stack on your balance gauge and the spell The Flare. When you use the 1-2-3 melee combo, each step grants 1 mana stack. And when you use Moulinet, each Moulinet cast grants 1 mana stack. When you have 3 mana stacks, your The Thunder and The Thunder 2 both turn into The Flare, which does a large amount of damage with an AoE component and no cast time. If you generate mana stacks and then use any spell, then the stacks are immediately lost. As such, make sure to only use Moulinet when you have 60 of each mana type, and then use it in sets of 3 specifically, such that you can use the Flare afterwards. In the same way, your melee combo is now extended to be 1-2-3 the Flare. If the Flare is used while you have less black mana than white mana, then it will always ready the fire. So, at this level specifically, you should try to always use sets of Moulinet or the 1-2-3 combo with an excess of white mana if possible. At level 70, you learn the spell The Holy, which is the white magic equivalent to the Flare and overrides both the Arrow and the Arrow 2 under the same criteria. Now, whenever you have 3 mana stacks, you can use the Flare or the Holy depending on which one is lower, and if you already have a proc of the one that is lower, you can chance on getting a proc with the other one, although be aware that if the gap between the mana types is larger than 30, then mana imbalance will make the lower one more difficult to generate, so take that into consideration. Make sure you always generate mana stacks while your mana types are unequal, such that there always will be one type that is lower. If they are equal, then neither one is guaranteed. Since level 60, you have unlocked a more powerful Jolt as well as Impact, changing the way you deal with 2 target encounters. Jolt into Impact spam. You also learned Reprise, possibly one of the strongest utility tools in the game. Make sure to use it when your group needs it. You also unlocked the mana stack and the Flare and the Holy, extending your 1-2-3 melee combos with a powerful finisher, where you should use the one that corresponds to the mana type that is lowest to ensure a proc. This finisher is also available after using 3 Moulinets. Just remember that the 1-2-3 combo costs 50 while Moulinet costs 60 to do 3 times. A thing to take note of is that with the introduction of the Flare and the Holy, your melee combo takes about 7.5 seconds in total to pull off, which means it will always displace flesh and contra sixth, so you may want to use acceleration or swift cast to realign afterwards. As Embolden lasts 20 seconds, you can still fit 2 full melee combos in the buff by keeping 50 of each mana type and using Manification alongside it. At level 72, the potencies of displacement and engagement are slightly increased. At level 74, the cooldown of Contra 6 is reduced slightly and the potencies of the Thunder 2 and the Arrow 2 are increased slightly. This does not change your rotation. At level 76, you learn the weapon skill Reprise. When you have 5 of each mana type, the enchanted Reprise is an instant ranged attack that you can use if you have to move for a while and have no other options. Just be aware that it is very expensive in terms of mana types, so try to use it as little as possible, if at all. At level 78, the cooldown of Manification is reduced slightly, and it gains an effect that makes the next 5 magic attacks, including melee combos, do extra damage. The intended purpose is that you use Manification, followed by either a 1-2-3 combo or 3 Moulinets, and then the Flare or the Holy. The 5th attack is intended to be the spell that you learn at level 80. This means that it is much more important that you use Manification followed immediately by a melee sequence. The shorter cooldown is helpful to realign Manification with Embolden, which can be necessary if you delayed Manification for the back-to-back melee combos previously mentioned. At level 80, you learn the spell Scorch. When you successfully cast the Flare or the Holy, Jolt and Impact both turn into Scorch, which is an even more powerful attack that also has an AoE component and no cast time. Since level 70, the main changes to your rotation is that Scorch is added onto the end of the melee combo. As this combo takes closer to 10.2 seconds to perform, using Embolden after the initial riposte is more likely to ensure that both Scorches land in the buff if you try to do 2 combos back to back. A worthwhile detail to mention is that Manification will cancel your melee combo or your magic burst combo if you use it in the middle of them. The magic burst combo is the Holy or the Flare, then Scorch, so using Manification after the Flare will cancel your opportunity to use Scorch. As such, make sure to either use Manification before the melee combo starts or right after Redoublement. Finally, because the full melee combo burst takes 10 seconds to perform now, Flash and Contra 6 should no longer be displaced by it. At level 82, the Thunder and the Arrow are upgraded into the Thunder 3 and the Arrow 3, making them stronger and flashier, but it does not change your rotation. At level 84, your melee combo and the rest of your regular spells get a boost to their potencies, meaning the spells that follow after the melee combo do not get a boost. This also does not change your rotation. At level 86, you learn the ability Magic Barrier, which reduces magic damage taken for your raid, and also boosts the healing they receive. The best time to use this is mostly any time you would want to use Cradle to weaken a raid-wide attack, as these tend to be magic more often than not. If the tank is going to take a big magic hit, you can also use it to just help them. At level 88, Acceleration is upgraded to have 2 charges. This means you can much more regularly use Acceleration and Swiftcast as a pair for damage reasons, assuming you don't need it for movement or alignment of Flash and Contra 6. Try to use both Swiftcast and just one Acceleration for this, such that they both go on cooldown when you choose to do so. At level 90, the damage buff of Manification is extended to 6 magic attacks, and you learn the spell Resolution. When you successfully cast Scorch, Jolt and Impact then turn into Resolution, which you should use immediately too for even more damage with an AoE component. Keep in mind that Resolution is a surprisingly thin line AoE, while the Flare, the Holy and Scorch are all circle AoE centered on your target. Additionally, adding in Resolution means that the full melee combo sequence takes around 12.5 seconds now, meaning that it once again displaces Flash and Contra 6. To round off, let's first talk about an opener, followed by general rotation tips, and then finish off with a brief talk about stat priorities. Keep in mind that outside of Savage raid teams, optimal openers that require a certain amount of startup time before combat begins can be troublesome. However, knowing the optimal opener can still be a helpful guideline, and so this opener should serve you well for all content. 5 seconds before the tank pulls, start casting the Thunder, and then dual cast the Arrow, weaving both Swift Cast and Acceleration. Then you instantly cast the Thunder. If you intend to use a Tincture, this is a good opportunity to do so. Then cast the Thunder again and make your way into melee range while you weave Embolden and Manification. Then you do Riposte weaving Flash, Zwerchau weaving Contra 6, Redoublement weaving Corps à Corps and Engagement. Then cast specifically the Holy and weave Corps à Corps and Engagement again. Then cast Scorch and then Resolution. After this, you can make use of your Fire proc and dual cast the Thunder, followed by making use of the Stone proc and dual cast the Arrow, and your general rotation begins here. Make sure to use Flash and Contra 6 on cooldown, and make sure that Corps à Corps and Engagement never sit on 2 charges, as that means you lose out on free damage. You can save 1 charge of each for mobility in case you need it, but you can also use them aggressively for extra damage. Make clever use of Swiftcast and Acceleration either to keep your attack up while moving, or to make sure that Flash and Contra 6 are delayed as rarely as possible. On average, Red Mages generate enough mana to use 3 melee combos over the course of 2 minutes, and this includes Manification. If you try to optimize, 2 of these combos will be spent around the 2-minute burst. I will get to that. Which means you only have 1 loose melee combo to use whenever you want. 2 melee combos in quick succession will also displace Flash and Contra 6 twice, ultimately fixing them again. This means that you likely only need to use Acceleration or Swift Cast once every 2 minutes to fix Flesh and Contra 6, leaving the rest of the uses for movement and free damage. Every 2 minutes, Embolden and Magnification will be available, known as the 2-minute burst window, which most jobs adhere to. Using Embolden as the clock to watch for, you can use Embolden after Redoublement, followed by the magic part of the burst. Additionally, remember that using Magnification immediately after Redoublement will not cancel the magic burst combo, but using it anywhere else will, meaning that you should only use Magnification immediately before a melee combo or immediately after a melee combo, which will allow you to chain 2 melee combos in quick succession. The idea behind beginning a melee combo just before Embolden is ready is intended to enable you to fit 2 sets of the magic burst part of the combo in the Embolden raid buff. On 2 targets specifically, the Thunder and the Arrow are replaced by Impact, and Acceleration can be used generously to boost the damage of Impact. There is still reason to use Acceleration and Swiftcast to align with Flesh and Contra 6, but since AoE encounters tend to be relatively short, this might be unnecessary. On 3 or more targets, Jolt, the Stone and the Fire are all replaced by the Arrow 2 and the Thunder 2. Your 1-2-3 melee combo is replaced by 3 Moulinets. Remember that it costs 60 mana of each type rather than 50, so if you wish to use Magnification for Moulinet combos, make sure you have at least 10 of each mana type beforehand. Finally, make sure to use the one of the Flare and the Holy that corresponds to the mana type you have less of when given the opportunity. Although, on a single target, you can get creative if you already have the proc it would give you. Also, make sure that you follow up with Scorch and Resolution afterwards. Now, let's briefly go over stat priorities. Keep in mind that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats, so you should always prioritize higher item levels first, as long as the item has intelligence on it. The recommended choice is to go for as much critical hit as possible, as this is the best scaling damage stat available. After that, Determination is preferred over Direct Hit as it is a fraction more powerful, but they are so close in damage value that they are interchangeable. Finally, Red Mage is preferred to have as little spell speed as possible. This is because you need to stack an enormous amount of spell speed to somehow, say, fit 4 melee combos in a 2-minute time frame rather than 3, which would be the only relevant benefit that would make a significant difference. Beyond that, Flash and Contra 6, not to mention your weapon skills, all don't benefit from spell speed, and as such, it is better to go for damage boosting stats. If you want to know what the absolute best options are, I would advise you to seek out communities that specialize in this, as anything I say could be outdated as early as tomorrow. That is all for this video. Thank you for watching. Consider liking, subscribing and hitting the bell if you would like to see more content like this. And if you have any questions or anything to add, leave a comment. If you want to support me and the channel even more, you can also become a member. Fun fact, while Embolden only buffs your own magic damage, making it incompatible with your ability-based attacks, other Red Mages using Embolden will grant you the general damage bonus, which is compatible. In fact, 2 Red Mages using Embolden at the same time will gain both effects and benefit from them. However, no one else will, so this is not really recommended.